Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Reds Rundown podcast, hosted by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob, and he's Joe, and we thank you for taking the time to join us today. Joe, as always, we start off with a, how you doing, pal? What's going on?
Oh, it's awesome. We just started off one of the best months of the whole year. We got March Madness coming up. We got actual Reds baseball at the end of the month. We're going to finish spring training and find out our roster and everything here in a couple weeks, but it is good. The weather's turning. It's a good time to be a Reds fan.
Oh my goodness, you are absolutely right. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up. Today, we are going to be discussing, going off of what Joe said, spring training games, what stood out to us in these games so far. This week's games, there's another slate of, I believe, 6 games, maybe 7. I'll have to, with a split squad coming up. 2 injuries to Spencer Steer and Alexis Diaz. Then we'll have the rumors of the Reds looking at more pitching depth for their starting rotation. Kind of wild. Extension discussions as well. And then we will get to our outfield predictions. So if you've been enjoying our predictions, make sure you stick around. Also, if you're new, if you're just finding this for the first time, please make sure to subscribe. We're putting out Reds content every single week. We'll be going throughout the entire season. Joe and I are very dedicated to this squad right now. Will always happen, but this is going to be a fun year, I think, for us to cover things. Hopefully we will not have a team that is dead in the water by May. That was very unfun for, I think, all of us as Reds fans. So we're feeling good about this year. Also, make sure to like if you enjoy this, as it helps us to keep growing this Reds community that we love so much. And let us know in the comment section below what your answer is to the question of the day, which is going to be, who do you think gets extended next? They've got a lot of young players. They're going to extend somebody. Who's it going to be, right? So let us know who you think that's going to be in the comments below. But let's head into it here. It was a good week for the Redlegs, Joe, this week. They started it off with an 8-1 win over the Dodgers. Austin Hayes had a day, almost 3 home runs, a double. That should have been 2 RBIs, but they cut it off for some reason because they said that he got thrown out before the run scored, which was not true, and I think they would have changed it if it was a real game, but spring training, they don't care. But he had 2 big home runs. Sal Stewart with his first home run. Brady Singer, 2 innings of work, 4 strikeouts. Carson Spires with 5 strikeouts as well. The rest of the bullpen looked good. Tony Santillan, Emilio Pagan, Scott Barlow as well, all with good little innings there. We move on. The Reds win 9-4 over the Angels as well. Mike Trout on the opposite side hits a home run, but Matt McLain with 2 big home runs. Ellie with another home run. Jacob Hurtubise, these are doubles. Sorry. Matt McLain with 2 doubles. He did have a home run in this game. Encarnacion Strand with a home run, and Ellie with his 3rd home run of the game. I knew I was saying that wrong when I saw Jacob Hurtubise with a home run. That doesn't happen. Noelvi Marte also had a triple in this game. Lodolo struggled in the first inning. They took him out, replaced him with somebody Miller. Don't really know. Won't make the team. But then they put Lodolo back in, and he had a much better second inning. In spring training, you can do that if they hit like a pitch limit. Taylor Rogers had a little, couple walks, but 3 big strikeouts. Ian Jabot was back, Joe, 2 strikeouts in 1 inning as well. And Lyon Richardson, who had struggled a little bit, had a nice inning as well in that game. The Reds tied 3-3 against the D-backs. Double for Jamer as well. Graham Ashcraft gave up a run, 2 walks, 2 innings, 3 strikeouts for him. Sam Mole had a weird game where he gave up 2 runs as well with a strikeout. Again, Scott Barlow with a really nice inning. Chase Petty with 2 innings, 1 walk, no strikeouts. And Big Sugar, Zach Maxwell, Joe, with an inning and 1 walk as well. Not much going for them offensively in this game. The next game against the Athletics was a stinker, to say the least. The Reds got on the board with a Will Benson triple and an RBI single by Blake Dunn, and that would be it. Hunter Green and Brent Suter struggled immensely, combining for 3 innings, 10 runs given up, 3 walks, 2 strikeouts, both by Hunter Green. We move on to I believe this was the Friday game they had. The Reds taking on the Padres, won 7-3 in this one. Another double by Matt McLean and another home run by Christian Encarnacion Strand, his second off of Dylan Cease, so a real pitcher for him, which was good. Brady Singer struggled. 1.2 innings pitched, 1 2/3, 2 strikeouts, 2 walks, 2 runs given up. But Taylor Rogers, Ian Jabot, Nick Martinez with 2 innings, 3 strikeouts as well. And the Reds would go on to win, as we said. Then yesterday's game, the Reds would finally beat the unbeaten Cubs, the only team left in spring training that was unbeaten. Tyler Stevenson with 2 doubles. Jake Fraley hit his first home run. Blake Dunn hit his first home run. And Will Benson also hit an absolute shot for his. Carson Spires, 3 innings, 1 run given up, 3 strikeouts. Brian Shaw struggled. 3 walks, a strikeout, 2 runs given up. But Barlow, Big Sugar, and a plethora of other pitchers would come in and get it done to give the Reds their 7-3 win. They are 5-3 in spring training. Joe, not that the record matters at all, but what is standing out to you right now? Who is standing out to you? What are some things of note that you would like to discuss from these games?
Yeah, we'll start off with the pitching. Still odd that Graham Ashcraft is starting these games. I would like to see him get more chances as a relief pitcher, but it seems like that's not necessarily in the cards. Now, spring training, a lot of times they do have relievers start games, but for a guy who's never been a reliever at the professional level, it would seem to be more interesting to me. It would be more beneficial for him to start as a reliever and kind of figure that out as the spring goes on.
Yeah.
But that also goes with the reports that they're looking for more starting pitching depth, which I get in the sense that, like, it's baseball. Pitchers get hurt at an alarmingly high rate these days. And, like, we've seen Dodgers put together 2 pitching staffs, or the Rangers last year, 2 pitching staffs worth of players just in case. But I do think there's other places we could kind of figure out what we want to do, whether that's bullpen, getting a little more bullpen help, whether that's getting another bat for the lineup. I think there's, especially with injuries already popping up, that is something that I would rather do. So that was surprising to me. It looks like Graham is going to be a starter, but probably in AAA to start the year, and we'll figure that out later. I've seen a lot of people talk about 2 players specifically with their strikeouts. We have Ellie. I believe he hasn't struck out in spring yet. If he did, it was like the last game.
Yeah.
Okay, it was the last game.
Yeah, he had like 2, I believe, this weekend.
He's up to 3, yeah. He got a couple this weekend. But he's cutting down on his strikeouts. And we have Will Benson. A lot of people are getting hyped about him. He's still batting .222. He is striking out a lot, 4 out of 9 at-bats. So his changed swing, I don't think is going to help that much. I think he's got maybe an uphill battle to make this roster, just with everything else we have. And then the last thing I'll say is the 2 guys who probably have impressed me more for different reasons. Austin Hayes has come in and had some huge games for us.
Yep.
Very happy about him. It looks like he has some of his power back, which is going to be beneficial for us. Then Matt McLean coming back from that injury has looked pretty good as well. I'm not sure I expected that quite so quick after all the injury issues he had last season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The other name I'll throw in there is, a couple, I guess. Santiago Espinal continues to hit, Joe. He has looked very good so far in this spring. Jamer as well has started to come on, especially in the latter half of the week, and has looked good. But Noel V. Marte continues to struggle. I believe he has a strikeout in 7 of his 13 at-bats. Not looking good for the young man. I don't know if it really was the PEDs that were just making him look so great. PEDs help. I think they help you recover, but they don't make you a great baseball player. They make you maybe an average baseball player. So a little disappointing to see that with him as well, but that is what it is. Also, Cooper Bowman has struggled immensely at the plate, Joe, so far. He is not making... I know he's learning new positions and everything, but, the whole conversation about it, learning a new position and affecting you at the plate, it's definitely a real thing. But at the same time, it shouldn't be coming into your at-bats mentally. Like, that is something you have to learn. I think somebody who we've seen do a great job of that is Spencer Steer, where it doesn't matter where he plays, he's going to come up and he's going to give you the same kind of an at-bat. That is a rare ability, it seems like, and we're seeing that with people like Cooper Bowman who are having to learn new positions. Pitching wise, I will say I've really liked some of our bullpen options so far. Scott Barlow's looked good. Taylor Rogers, like the new additions there. I'm very happy with that. Tony Santillan as well. Joe, I want to give a little shout out to him. He has looked very good so far this spring. He's pitching to make the roster. Remember, there are guys who are pitching to learn things. Hunter Green is, probably trying out new pitches and stuff. I haven't been able to see the games live yet. For the most part, like I've followed them while they're happening, but I haven't been able to watch like every single pitch. But I'm assuming Hunter Green is, trying out some new stuff. But Santillan's pitching to try to make the squad, and he's doing a good job so far. He is shutting it down and playing well. So I wanted to give him a little shout out as well. But that's what we got this week. We have the Brewers today. We've got a split squad against the Rangers on Tuesday, or the Rockies, excuse me. Then we have the Rangers on Wednesday. Is that right? Am I reading this right? 1 second. Yeah, the Rangers. Then we have a Thursday off day. Then the Giants on Friday. Diamondbacks, part of their split squad, but not ours, on Saturday. And the Angels on Sunday. I should have said in here as well, the Dodgers will be part of that split squad for us on Tuesday. Spencer Steer, Joe, is dealing with a shoulder injury. They just gave him a cortisol shot the other day, so he'll be having a little time off. Apparently, it's not affecting his swing at all, but every time he goes to throw, there's a little bit of pain. They've done MRIs, multiple of them. They said there's nothing wrong in that regard. I am tendinitis and stuff like that, right, can be a problem, especially in your shoulder. But I'm a little concerned that we are, a week into spring training, and they're just now giving him a shot when he's had all offseason to, I'm sure, be doing throwing programs, all this other stuff, and he's just now having, to get, like, they've done MRIs and everything. I'm just very confused as to how this is, like, such a new thing that the Reds are just like, oh, he's fine, but he's not. And apparently he's been dealing with this through most of last year as well. This is, to me, I'm not trying to blow it out of proportion, but it is a concern for me. Like, if he can't throw it all, then he's going to have to be their DH this season for the most part, which I don't think is a terrible thing in terms of, like, I think he'd be a great bat, but that does kind of mix things up for this roster significantly in my mind, Joe. And I'm just concerned as to why we continue to have these weird health problems. Every team has injuries. There's no doubt about it. But why is it that we have these random weird shoulder injuries that just happen to kind of linger, and then all of a sudden you have Matt McClain who's out for the entire year because he tore his labrum? Like, I guess I'm just really trying to figure out what's going on here, Joe. Maybe you can give me some insight.
I mean, I can't. No structural damage, so it's something that they can't see. This happens with players from time to time where there's just injuries where people can't figure out, and it stinks that, like, for the Reds, that this is happening to Steer. I think with McClain, obviously, it was more known what happened and everything. But
yeah,
I think this does resign him to the DH role probably for the whole year. I mean, I'd imagine they didn't give him any cortisone shots in the offseason just because they wanted to let it heal naturally and see how it came back. But it makes it tough because I think we have him possibly having to be the DH, possibly having to go on the injured list at some point in the season. They say they don't really think he's going to miss any time for the regular season at this point.
That's
just
good.
Everyone, so no need to freak out on that, but it could definitely happen. And then also, we have a kind of a team now where if we have a couple injuries, things get kind of dicey. So, say Spencer Steer gets injured and he has to miss time because of this. Even he says it's not affecting his batting right now, but if it does, got to put him on the injured list. Then Matt McClain has injuries pop up. He's a little bit injury prone. Then you're down two guys. You got to move Gavin Lux to second. You got to move someone else into third. Santiago Espinal now becomes a guy who we love as a utility guy, but maybe not as an everyday player. Although I probably would like that at least to start. I don't want injuries, but I think he's earned the right to kind of get more playing time. And you just kind of look at it like one more injury, and this team goes from like possibly we talked about like could make the playoffs to could be bad. Like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Like this is like the start of possibly like the news. I think last year we had a couple injuries in spring and we're like, oh, we'll be fine. We got depth, and then found out that our AAA depth wasn't great. We just talked about like some of the guys, Rob, that are struggling in spring training. Like Cooper Bowman probably sending him back. That's going to be tough. We're going to have Noel Marte can't come up and play third base because he's not hitting the ball at all. So it's not like a sound of the alarm yet, because he still can be the DH, and I think it might fit him better this year just to not worry about defense. I think that maybe it started to get to him a little bit last year when, he was playing so many positions and doing so many different things with an injury as well. But this does kind of make us a little bit vulnerable moving forward because we don't have that depth that a lot of other teams have as position players. We just talked about we're looking for starting pitching depth. I think when you start having these injuries, you might need to start looking at possibly getting more depth for the opening day ball club because, like I said, 1 or 2 more injuries, we're back out there with Will Benson starting in right field every day, and I don't think that's something people want.
Yeah, I will say the one thing I thought maybe as a solution to this, Joe, is they just stick him at first base and they make him the everyday first baseman. He doesn't have to make necessarily a lot of throws, right? And if it's not if there's no structural damage, right? Like, it actually, funny enough, it reminds me of Scott Hatteberg, right? If you guys know the story of him, like, his arm was basically dead. They just moved him to first base and he could make the throws occasionally when he had to, right? I feel like the Reds could do that because he is still very good defensively, and I'm sure he can underhand the ball, right, after fielding something. And if he needs to turn two, right, he's halfway to second base sometimes when he's having to make those types of plays from first, right? So if it's really not that it's going to be a structural thing and it's just a pain management thing, I think they could probably stick him at first base and be okay. What it does become a problem for, though, like you said, is the outfield. The outfield becomes incredibly scrunched. And at that point, I start to wonder if Gavin Lux gets pushed out into left field, to be honest with you. And I'm fine with that. He just wants to play. That sounds good to me. And if he learns how to play outfield well, Great American isn't really a hard place necessarily. He doesn't have to cover a lot of ground. I know, obviously, we have to play everywhere else, but that's where my mind starts going, Joe, is if he can swing and he's fine, then great. DH him, play him at first base, no biggie, right? But, because he's not making as many throws. But I do worry about him long term, and I wonder what they're going to do with that. I don't think we are in as dire of a situation as we were last year yet, just because he doesn't have the structural damage, right? With Matt McClain, it felt like he was really just trying to battle through a labrum tear, and you just can't do it, right? When they finally did the MRI, it was like, oh, wow, okay, this is actually not good. If they've already checked Steer's shoulder and he's fine, then I'm not going to worry about it, to be honest with you. Like, tendonitis and things like that, like, they'll flare up, and they can be a pain for a while, right? And it's mostly you just got to rest it, and just eventually it kind of goes away. But I think he is going to be sucking down ibuprofen, if that's the case, to try to get the swelling down, and I'm sure they have better methods than just that. But we'll have to see. That was worth noting for sure. Alexis Diaz, I didn't even think about this, but he had not pitched yet. Apparently he tweaked something during PFPs, which is pitcher's fielding practice, for those who do not know. They said they dodged a bullet. It sounded like there was no structural damage. They didn't anticipate it taking him out very long. They're just doing this as a precaution. So he will be back. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one, Joe, but yeah.
No, I mean,
presumably he'll be back this week. So
yeah, most places didn't even write a news story about it. It's just let's get him back on track, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, he's got 3 weeks to pitch. I'm sure he'll be fine. Rotation depth. I want to dive into this a tiny bit more, Joe. What are the Reds? Because if we already are having the discussion, Joe, about people like Andrew Abbott not making the rotation, right? Like, if that's something that is being discussed widely, by the way, right now, then what are we looking for in rotation depth? Are we just looking for, quadruple A guys that can be that guy? Like, I mean, Ashcraft has looked fine for the most part. I don't see a problem. Brandon Williamson was at picture day, Joe. He was there. I know he's not coming back until like the middle of the season, but Brandon Williamson, I think, is a fine pitcher when he's healthy, to be honest with you. I think if you've got him and Graham Ashcraft and Wade Miley down there in AAA, right? Like, that was the whole point of signing Wade Miley, was so that he would give you some depth while he's, coming back and figuring it all out. You've got 3 or 4 starting pitchers down already in AAA. Like, what else are they looking for? I don't even know who else is really available at this point. And then not to mention, you still have guys like Chase Petty, Chase Burns, who are coming up. We don't even know if Rhett Lauder is going to make the opening day rotation at this point because he's had his injury. Like, how many more starting pitchers do you want? There are, like you said, other positions. Go get a freaking outfielder, man. There are still some guys. Like, just go sign Alex Verdugo. I know he's not great, but, like, just go grab him at this point, right? Like, if you can and you're worried that Spencer Steer is not going to be able to play outfield all season, go get him. I'd rather have him than Will Benson at this point. So I just don't understand it. I'm very confused, and I'm sure Verdugo would sign a very team-friendly one-year deal just to get out on the field. I'm not just saying him, but I think he might be the best one who's available right now. Somebody's going to sign him with an injury at some point. But it's just wild to me that the rumor, and again, this is a pretty verified rumor from what I can tell, Joe, that they are looking. So I don't understand what Kroll is trying to do here, but I don't know.
Maybe he's seeing flashbacks of last year with injuries and the young guys not finishing the season. And that's tough because this is a sport where if you have everything, like the Dodgers and the Rangers we mentioned, yeah, go get a second rotation. And that makes sense. But we don't have everything. We don't have all that money. And to be honest, it's nice to try to be one of the bigger teams and get in this big arms race that everyone's in. We can't afford it. Unless they want to pay more money. If they want to pay more money, then yeah, go ahead and do this. Go get an outfielder. Go get a star. Yeah, that'd be great. But I think they're trying to get to a point where they're not just reliant on getting lucky with not having injuries. But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, this is fine if you want to do this at a low cost for someone. But if we're ever going to win anything, because we're a small market team, until we start spending more money, it's going to take an insane amount of injury luck on our end to even compete with teams like the Dodgers. So, yeah, I get it. We have young guys. We haven't stayed the healthiest. I, in theory, love adding more starting pitching depth, even if it is guys like Wade Miley who aren't coming back until May and other guys who just have a chance to make the roster. But it seems like there's other places that could go. We could get another star bullpen pitcher. We can get, which again would cost less than a starter, so that would make more sense. We could get another outfielder, like you said. We could get, if we think some of this Spencer Steer injury is going to linger, we can get someone to actually be the DH. I don't know. There's so many different ways to go about it. So, like I said, the only thing I can think of is, like, in theory it's fine, but in practice, it's going to take so much luck, and it just doesn't make sense to me that they would trot out this lineup, which has the potential to be better than we thought, but still has some holes in it, especially with Spencer Steer's injury already, and that's what they want to do. So, a little confusing. That they want to kind of play with the big boys but don't want to spend the money to do so.
Well, because they're not going to go get a big boy pitcher. That has to be the reasoning, right? Like, they were in talks like all offseason to go get Nick Pivetta. Super glad they didn't, because that Padres deal with him for, I think it was like 4 years, wild. They don't need guys like that right now. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It was very weird to me. I just don't understand it. To me, it shows that they lack confidence in guys like Chase Petty to be able to even just be a 5-starter later on this season, and that's fine, but what the hell are we doing then at this point? Like, they're propping people up like him, and I don't really get it. I'm very confused, but it's fine. Maybe the Reds are confused too, because they have a lot of like B pieces, Joe. They just don't have a lot of A pieces right now, right? And they hope that some of the B pieces are going to turn into A pieces. But when you have, I'm going to exaggerate, 50 B pieces, right, and you still don't know if any of them have the actual potential to be an A piece, it feels like we're doing this year what we should have done last year, and I know that a lot of that was because of people like Encarnacion Strand getting injured all season, Brandon Williamson getting injured all season, Matt McClain getting injured all season, right? Like, we just had horrible injury luck last year. Not just bad, but horrible. So maybe that's what it is, Joe, but I don't know. You got any final thoughts before we move on real quick to extension talks and then our outfield predictions?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who they would get. It would be someone like Nick Pivetta, obviously on a way lower deal now because of the time of the year we're in now, where it's like, hey, if you don't have a team already, you're probably not very good. There are some guys, like you said, Verdugo in the outfield, but if you kind of think about like teams who are going to compete, they usually have a couple bench pieces to work with. Right now, Our bench, we have to assume, let's just assume Steer's the DH. We'll talk about the outfield later. That means I think our bench is going to be Espinal, we've already talked about.
Yep,
And we like
great.
him.
Great piece.
Jose Trevino is the
Great
catcher.
piece.
And that's fine to be a backup catcher. And we're relying on guys who were either injured or young last year or guys who didn't play well last year. We have CES. We have possibly Jake Fraley, depending on how the outfield works out.
Yep.
We have Cooper Bowman, who's not hitting the ball very well. Will Benson, Stu Fairchild, we have our issues with them as well. That's not a good bench. And if you look at the fact that the starting lineup is probably not top 5 in the National League, probably not. Even at our best expectations, probably not top 5, probably not top 6 or 7. That makes you kind of be like, hey, it's great we're getting starting pitching depth. We already have, assuming Wade Miley comes back healthy and like maybe could be a guy, we have like 8 or 9 guys you could throw in as starters this year if people get hurt. Probably even 10 if Nick Martinez can move bullpen and back. It looks like he's going to be a starter, but like you have some flexibility here with some of the guys you have. Tony Santillan as well, former starter.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I don't get is you have the end of the bench being that bad. You have the lineup with some holes in it already. I'm okay with the lineup going into the season, but if they were going to make another move, it just makes more sense to me to be bullpen, bench bat, something, because we're relying on so many unknowns in that category.
Yeah, and that's where I'm struggling. That's what I'm talking about. I'm saying B guys as to be nice. A lot of potential quadruple A guys on this team, and that's not exactly something that you want. Apparently there are no extensions that are being apparently Steer and Stevenson have come to the Reds, or their agents more specifically, and let them know that they are willing to look into an extension, that they would like to, more accurately. But the Reds have really only signed Hunter Green to that what's looking like potentially one of the best deals in baseball at this point, if he turns into a Cy Young candidate like he was last year. He can do that consistently, Joe. I want to start with the quick discussion on, why is it that the Reds aren't doing this a little bit more, and then who do you think that you would like for them to go after next? Because I got one name for sure that's going to have to happen in my mind, and then another one that I think should. So let me know where you're at with this. I think part of it has to do with injuries, but I'd love to know what you're feeling.
So the reason why extensions aren't getting done is, part A is the Reds not having money or saying they don't have money to sign these guys, and that is partially true, but also we've talked about a lot. They could do a lot more.
Yep.
And they can even save money in the long term if they want to do that, so that's like they did with Hunter Green. Good deal. But I think another part of it is a lot of their young players are using Scott Boras as an agent. Historically, we have not done well with him. A lot because he tries to squeeze the lemon and try to get as much as possible for his clients, which is his job.
Yep.
He's criticized for doing that. And he should be a little bit criticized. Like, there are points where it's like, okay, maybe don't send this guy to a worse situation just to get more money.
Yeah.
But in theory, he's doing his job, and the Reds just never get into a bidding war with anyone. We don't pay anyone any amount of money unless they're already on our team, and that's usually rare, too. So that's why we've had some hiccups, in my opinion. But that makes it tough to say who's the next contract extension going to be, because, that's Ellie and Matt McClain's agent. So I'm starting to think we're only going to be able to afford one of them. And I would think Matt McClain would be the guy we go after because he's not going to produce astronomical numbers like Ellie does. And he's got some injury history now, too, where that does lower your value a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know what that number is going to look like, though. So I would say the Reds, just knowing them, will try to make Matt McClain the guy they keep around forever, because it's going to be better value than you'll get with Ellie. Based on, not that Ellie's I'm not saying Ellie's a worse player, but just the value of the contract. So
yeah,
that would be my estimation. I don't know how they get this done with Scott Boras as the agent. They just historically are so bad with him, and that makes it so tough. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts. Like, Hunter Green was really good. I could see it being one of the other young pitchers first, but that's what's going to make things interesting is, like, the two guys you would think you want to lock up after Hunter Green would be Matt McClain and Ellie De La Cruz, and it's very hard to see a world where that happens anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to, I think injuries and the unknown. I think they would have signed McClain actually this offseason, to be honest with you, Joe, if he had played last year. I think if the Reds want to get a deal, I think they take a chance on McClain. They buy out his arbitration years, right? And extend him. I think that would be a smart move for them. I really think they should do it for Ellie too, because he's not going to get any, like, unless if they really expect him to regress, and at that point, like, that's not good for the team, right? He's not going to get any cheaper than he is right now, right? In all reality, because I think he's only going to get better. He's 23 years old. They have him until he's like 27, I think, 26, 27. So we've got a few more years without a doubt. But you want to extend that, right? Like, get him at least 2 more years. Get him until he's 29, and then let somebody else take him. Right at that point is the way I see it. And I can get why they would be afraid, right? Like, Ellie really was such an unknown that grew into, and I do literally mean grew into being a great baseball player, right? Like, he's grown, I think they said was like 6 or 7 inches since he joined the Reds back, when he was like, I don't know, what was it, like 17, 18 years old, right? So, like, he has grown and become a great prospect, right? He was not like ordained from the second that he kind of, got added by the Reds. That's why they were able to get him for a relatively cheap amount compared to some of these other signings that they get. But all of that is to say, I think the guy they're going to get next is, I think it's going to have to be Tyler Stevenson, to be honest with you. Having a solid catcher is so hard to come by these days, right? To have like a true starter. And his contract is actually one of the next ones up. I believe he is done after next season. He's a free agent. So I think that one makes the most sense to me. I feel like that seems pretty likely at this point. I don't think they extend him for a super long period of time because he'll be like 28, I believe, by the end of that contract. So I could see them going another 2 or 3 years with him, to be honest with you, and I think he's the most likely one. Especially if he's healthy for this season for the most part, then I think they just kind of roll the dice on that one. I don't really see any catching prospects that they have coming up, Joe, to be honest with you, either. They have not really drafted many that I can think of. I know they've drafted some guys like Matt Nelson and stuff like that who aren't really working out all that well, but I do think that a catcher that can bat well right now with a backup catcher who is good defensively, which is exactly what the Reds have, seems to make sense to me. Catchers fall off a little bit earlier than most other position players, obviously, so I would say you get him through his 30, 31 season maybe and call it a day there. So that's who I'm looking at. I do like your theory, though, with McLean, right? If Matt McLean can be the Dustin Pedroia type guy, the Jose Altuve type guy that everybody says, right? Like, where, he's mostly being undervalued based on his size and not just the fact that he's a very good baseball player, right? Because, again, I think we talked about this last week, like, fundamentally, he's actually better at shortstop than Ellie is. But Ellie's got the range, Ellie's got a better arm, right? And his raw potential is better. So I could see them, like you said, just kind of doubling down, and as long as his shoulder injury and his oblique injury aren't a big deal for this season, Joe, like, if they think he's going to be relatively healthy, then it's like, yeah, you put the money into him, and you're just like, hey, guys, sorry, we couldn't get Ellie, but Matt McLean's going to be a Red. He's the next Joey Votto type guy for us, and we're going to keep him around for a while. And I think fans would be pissed. I'm going to be sad when Ellie leaves one day because it's probably going to happen. But if they can at least keep Matt McLean, and instead of having a top 5 baseball player, we have a guaranteed top like 25 maybe, right? Maybe 30, then fine. That's fine with me for now, and you build up around him, and you'll survive. Be sad, but survive.
Yeah, it's something we saw with the Houston Astros. They let Carlos Correa walk. They kept Jose Altuve. That worked out pretty well for them. Other than they won one World Series with Carlos Correa, one without him, and so they can still do it. But this is something we've kind of seen in other sports. We talked about with the Bengals and maybe sometimes with the Dallas Cowboys, with Jerry Jones, of like, the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be for you as a franchise when this comes to. Ellie could have a monster season where he steals 100 bases and has 50 home runs this year, and guess what? The price goes way up, especially given his agent. So this is like, the best time to sign him was yesterday. The next best time is now. So I would love for them to be aggressive and start doing this. Don't know if it's going to happen. And honestly, if things don't go as you expect, and say Ellie doesn't turn into the star that we all think he is, right? Then you might be paying a player who's not as good as you thought. So like, it's one of those times, like, things where time does dictate everything for these teams and the value of contracts. And there's almost, the longer you push this on, there's almost no value you're going to get out of it because either he's not going to perform and you pay him less for it, but the value you don't know, like, is he going to become that guy? Is he going to be able to perform? Or he kills it and then you got to pay him even more money. So props we gave them with the Hunter Green deal, getting it done early, now knowing how much of a value that is. I'm super surprised they have not applied that to Ellie or Matt McClain or even any other, even if they want to say, like, hey, Scott Boras is part of the problem, and maybe do it with someone else, because it's not just like they're going to have three guys that they're going to try to get extensions done with. They're going to have, like you said, Spencer Steer, Tyler Stevenson, Nick Lodolo, Andrew Abbott, Rhett Lauder, Chase Burns in several years, right? So I would have thought they would have tried to lock people up. I've mentioned a couple times, like, the Braves did it right by locking up all their young guys. Yes, some of them have been injured, but they locked them up early, and now they have, every year they're competing, and that makes it to where it's like NL East is such a big, it's such a tough division, but they always have a chance because they signed these guys early.
Yeah, and the Reds should learn from that. They really should. They won't, but they should. All right, let's get into our outfield predictions, Joe. We've got, I think, a few. We'll do what we've been doing, which is going back and forth. We don't have very many spots left, Joe, based on what we have done here. We have 4, maybe 5, depending on how you want to do Steer, especially now that he is injured, right? And it sounds like they're feeling less likely that he's going to play left field to start the season. I think for now we take him out of that conversation, right? Which means that we still have 4, maybe 5 spots, because maybe then CES gets moved down to AAA. So I will let you make that decision, but I will say I'll let you start with your first pick on some who's going to be in the outfield. Joe, who's starting for us?
All right. Yeah, I think I have 5 spots left because my only bench was Santiago, Trevino, and CES.
Okay.
So I think you were around the same. I think you were around the same number too. I'm not 100% sure you were.
Well, right now I'll give you a quick rundown real quick, just so you know who I have that we both agreed on. So we have Stevenson and Trevino, Jamer, Spencer Steer, Matt McClain, Gavin Lux, Ellie De La Cruz, Santiago Espinal, and CES. So that's 9. So we have 4 spots left currently, because we have 13 pitchers already. So that was. Did I miss somebody from last week?
No, but remember you had Spencer Steer in the infield item in the outfield. So
that's what I'm saying. So
I think I still have 5. You have 4 because of that. I don't know. I think my math might be wrong, but my numbers say 5. I'm going to go first pick here. Austin Hayes. We got him this offseason. He's killing the ball in spring training. We talked about how his power is going to be bigger this year now that he doesn't have the health issues, and now that he's playing in Great American Ballpark, where they, in Baltimore they threw the fence back on him, and that definitely affected things. Could be, we said it last week, could be the best signing that we have. A guy that really does play better than his contract is worth, and that is something to note. With the injury to Spencer Steer, he becomes even more valuable with that outfield. So whether you put him in right or left field now, I don't know, because, it's one of those things where Spencer Steer, I was kind of slotting into left field, but Hayes has been playing a lot of left field during spring training, so I would say he probably starts in left field because of the Spencer Steer injury, and that kind of clears some things up for us. I
think he's going to hit 30 home runs if he's healthy this year, dude. His bat is so freaking quick. His wrists, his hands are so strong. I love this Austin Hayes signing. He was so under the radar. I think we may have mentioned him as somebody who they should look at once, right? And it was I don't know why we didn't really think about him that much. It was probably just because he did have such a bad year, and I don't know if you knew. I did not know that he had that kidney, problem. That was, I'm going to tell you right now, if you have a kidney infection, that can be life-threatening, right? Depending on how bad it is. So the fact that he was able to play through that is pretty impressive, and you've already, in one game, he had almost 3 home runs. That's just wild to me. I think he's going to be a potential 30 home run guy, and I'm honestly pretty excited for it. I love his bat. I'm going to give my second guy here, Joe, and he's going to be the last one that I think is going to be a for sure starter. After that, I do not know who else is going to start here. And it's TJ Friedel in center field. guys, like, he had a bit of a down year last year. He was injured like 3 or 4 times. Sometimes that happens. We're just going to get to find out whether or not that's going to happen on a consistent basis for him, right? Like, is that going to be something that's going to happen a lot this year or not? I will say he looked a little slower running the bases the other day, Joe. I don't know if maybe they were just telling him to hold back a little bit, but I was a little worried by that. But he's got good jump, right? Or a good eye, can jump at the ball still. I think he's fine in center field, even if he is a step slower maybe. But I want to see him hit this year. I mean, what was it, 2023? He finished top 20 somehow in MVP votes. I don't think that's going to happen again this year, but I do think that he has the potential to be, a top 10 center fielder in baseball if, he kind of puts all together again and can stay healthy. So he's the only other guy who I have slotted to 100% start at a position in the outfield. I do not know who's going to go into the other corner outfield position. And that's mainly because Steer is hurt, to be clear. If Spencer Steer was not hurt, I would have Steer, Hayes, and Friedel as my outfield pretty much every day. And you could potentially move some other guys in if one of them starts to struggle against righties. But that's who I have right now as my starters in the outfield, Joe. But again, I don't have that third one, technically.
TJ Friedel's definitely a starter for me as well. This is a wild card for me because he's going to start the year, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But he had the injuries last year. He was not this big prospect, so he came up and had some success. Now the injuries, it's like, what are we going to get out of him? I know we're going to get some pretty good defense, and hopefully he stays healthy with that. Can he continue to be a good offensive player for us? I think this could be the guy that we're sitting here in September and we're in contention to make the playoffs. It's like, okay, he stayed healthy. He hit the ball maybe not as good as a couple of years ago, but maybe hit the ball pretty well. And at different times, maybe he was the top of the lineup and he got on base for us and set things up for Ellie. I don't know how they're going to end up doing the lineup. With Terry being manager, I think he's had some pretty good ideas in the past, but that's kind of what I'll say is he's done enough to earn the nod opening day center fielder. But there is there's the world where he hits 280 and he's a star for us again, or there's a world where he hits 240 and he gets hurt and we're kind of like, oh shoot, our outfield's real bad because we have Austin Hayes and then no one else. With some of the other guys. So definitely like that you had him second and does fit in this outfield to start the year, and I'm hoping we get the better version of him, or even in the middle would be good too.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at it, that season that he had 280, a 352 on base, 819 OPS, which was great, 18 home runs, 66 RBIs, 22 doubles, 27 stolen bases. It's a great season for anybody, honestly. I think he can probably hit 260 this year. Even last year, while he was, still very injured, he had a .5 WAR in 85 games. He had 13 home runs somehow. It seemed like his power was starting to kind of get there as well. He doesn't strike out a lot, which I think is great. And I think if you can be a guy who can put the bat on the ball, you've got obviously a much better chance to get on base. So, I'm hopeful that he can be a 260 plus guy, Joe. I think if he can do that, then we're going to be very happy with him in this lineup. And I think he has that ability to do that, to be honest with you. But this is a big year for him, Joe, because I think he also has a contract coming up, maybe at the end of this season. I'll have to check really quickly. I want to say, I don't know if I can find it. Yeah, he is, actually, wow, never mind. His earliest free agency is 2029. Would have never thought that. Okay, so never mind. But it's still a big season for him if he's going to be kind of solidify himself as a starter for our Cincinnati Reds. So we'll have to see with him, Joe, but I think he's got the ability to be that guy for us. So I'm hopeful. All right, who's your next guy then? Who do you have currently penciled in to be that other corner outfield spot?
Yeah, we still have DH to go and then one more bench spot. I just totaled it up for me, so that makes things a little bit more clear with the Spencer Steer injury.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go Jake Fraley.
Okay.
I don't like that I'm going Jake Fraley, but that's the position we're in. You're choosing between him and some other guys who have not performed or maybe aren't everyday players. We saw last year that his power numbers were down, and that obviously there were some health concerns, there were some family issues. I'm just hoping that another offseason gets him closer to what I think he can be, and that's possibly, again, maybe hitting 260, maybe having some pop in his bat. Good news so far in spring, 1 home run, so that's pretty good.
And a double, I think, as well.
Yep, and 2 RBIs, so he's doing pretty well. I think this is a pick that is not because he's played so well, but more so of our lack of availability. So I'm not thrilled about having him in there, but I do think if he somehow gets back to being what he was, he could be a solid player for us in the outfield, and it makes it to where, we don't have to rely on Will Benson being out there so much this year, which for right now still seems like it might be a bad idea. So Nick Fraley, yeah, and I'm selling him really hard right now, but that's what we're going with.
I'll sell him a little harder for you because he's also my guy that I was going to put next. And I think this will help maybe people feel a little bit better about him. The last 3 years, his batting average, 259, 256, 277. What he did last year was realize that he got really sick at the beginning of the year. He lost all that muscle mass, and they said that, because it's in season, it's really hard to gain muscle mass in season. That is like a known thing for baseball players in general, right? For players of any sport. Most of the time you're bulking during the off season. And that's why we saw him, he was a guy who 9 home runs, 12 home runs, 15 home runs, 5 home runs, right? And he played in the most games he's ever played in his entire career last year. What I love about him, Joe, is he's actually great at bat-to-ball skills. He played more games, he had the same amount of at-bats, and he struck out 1 time less. So he had 70 strikeouts in 382 plate appearances, which is pretty good, all things considered. His problem was he had no power, right? He actually had more doubles last season, Joe, than he did the season before, but it was the home runs that cost him. So if he spent this offseason bulking up, right, he could be that guy who would, in my opinion, be an outstanding 4th outfielder. Great 4th outfielder. I'm going to say probably a below average starter. And I don't know why, because it's like he had arguably the best season in terms of bat to ball on the team, right? His batting average, I believe, was the highest for the people who had the same amount or even close to the same amount of games and at-bats as he did, right? But it just never felt that he was able to do much. It felt like he was on base a lot, but it didn't matter, right? I don't know if maybe it was because nobody else was, backing him up or whatever. But if he's your guy who's batting 8th or 9th in your lineup and can get on base to set things up for the top of the order, I can see him having a great season in that regard. He had 20 stolen bases last year as well, Joe. It's just wild because you go between him and Friedel, right? And Friedel had that season 279, 90 strikeouts, 18 home runs, 66 RBIs, 27 stolen bases. Then you go to Fraley's. 277 batting average, very similar. 20 stolen bases, very similar. But 26 RBIs and 5 home runs, right? That's where it was. He wasn't hitting with guys in scoring position, and he wasn't driving the ball for any power. If he can get back to that, if he can bat 277 and hit 15 home runs and drive in 65 RBIs like he did the season before, he's a 2+ WAR guy for us, Joe. He is. And that's actually pretty solid. You're not going to be upset about that. So I am hopeful. I'm trying to be hopeful for him because not only is he, one of those great guys, on that great guy list, Joe, that we always have, but he works hard. I think he's a below average defender, but I think his bat speaks for him and can allow him to have meaningful at-bats for this team. And if I have to pick a third guy right now, it's got to be him. I don't think there's another person I would honestly really consider with Sear, being injured. So trying to be more helpful, trying to be more positive for him. It is just such a weird thing to see him have a very similar season to TJ Friedel, right? But then it's just because he had no power. You know what I mean?
Well, it is. Yeah, we did vouch for him a lot more last year because of his average. He did have a good season average-wise. It was pretty criminal. David Bell had Will Benson trotting out there with the negative 1.4
yeah.
WAR over Jake Fraley, who 0.3 in 116 games played isn't great, but
nope.
For what we had last year, I mean, that was amazing. So, highest batting average on the team of anyone who played 100 games or more. Didn't qualify because he didn't get enough at bats, but for any of like league leader stuff. But he's a guy that, like, again, there's a little bit of a wild card out there, more so than Friedel. But if he can give us another year where he hits 277 and actually gets to play more, that WAR goes up because it's a cumulative stat, and maybe he looks a little bit better. And honestly, there's more hitters around him, too, that make him look better, too, where it's, a lot of times last year there was no protection for anyone in this lineup, let alone we talk about Ellie not having protection, but there was not much of anything. So I look forward to this season seeing what he can do, and I think that he gets the nod as the third starting outfielder to start. But I do think after Friedel and Hayes, there will be a much quicker hook if guys aren't performing. Terry wants to win. He wants to win now. And whether the front office kind of agrees with him or not on what they're going to do, I think that's going to be the thing, is like, there could be a world where they go with a hot hand with this third outfielder spot. But I think Fraley gets the nod for most of the time to start the season.
Yeah, I'm looking real quick at his Baseball Savant page as well. And it is interesting. I mean, like, his Ks and whiffs, one of the best, but his slugging percentage, one of the worst. His average exit velocity, one of the worst. His barrel, hard hit, and squared up, some of the worst in baseball. It's like if he can change that, right? If he can kind of get back to what that was last season, which was a little bit better at least, that would help him like immensely, to be honest with you. So we will have to see. He's not a big power guy, but he does make contact, and that can be very, very useful if you use him correctly, Joe. That's the big deal. And again, I think as a fourth outfielder, he'd be awesome. I didn't even realize his arm strength, Joe, is actually one of the best in baseball. He's in the 89th percentile, so he's averaging almost 90 miles an hour on his throws, which is great. So I have seen him hose guys down. It's just that he's normally having to do that because of the fact that he's missing a ball. So, but his base running is good too. Like, he's such a good bench guy. He would be an absolutely awesome bench guy for the Reds to have for a long time. But he's having to play on a regular basis, and it's just disappointing, to be honest with you. But all right, so we've got the DH spot, which I think we're just going to give to Spencer Steer. We already talked about him last time. I think that's what will happen. So then that means that we have one more outfield spot currently, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'll name a few guys who I think this comes down to. I think you're looking at, Will Benson, Joe, as much as we don't want to. I think you're looking at Cooper Bowman as somebody who, they're trying to give some time in the outfield. Blake Dunn, Stu Fairchild, Reese Hines, Jacob Hurtubise. These are some of the names that you are looking at right now. And if I'm being honest with you, I saw somebody tweet this the other day, and it kills me to think that they are right, but I think you have to go with Will Benson here, and the main reason for that is he still does have the most potential of the rest of the guys on this. And as much as I love Stu, because I think Stu did his job very well last year, and I think if he didn't have to hit against a ton of righties, I think he'd be honestly a lock for this roster. Like, if they were just like, you are just going to play defensive outfield and you are just going to bat against left-handers, boom, pencil them in, let's do this. I don't love having three lefties in the outfield, Joe. It's not my favorite thing, but most of your infield is righty, right? So I think you can get away with it. To me, it's between Benson and it's between Fairchild, to be honest with you. And Will Benson is still, I want to say, I'm going to make sure that I'm not wrong on this, because I think he's still a pretty decent outfielder in terms of fielding, to be honest with you. He's got a good arm. I think he's pretty fast, right? Like, I think he can throw the ball very hard when he needs to. Like, I think he gets pretty good reads off of the ball. It's just the fact that he just struggles so much hitting, I mean, we saw 2013 and it looked like, dude, this guy's going to be a stud, but he gets 60 more at bats. He walks the same amount, as he did before. He strikes out 51 times in those 60 extra at-bats, Joe. Like, that is incredible for him to have fallen off that hard. I will say I have been critical of his swing. It looks like he changed it again, Joe, so that might be why he's struggling a little bit, because it looks a lot more compact. He doesn't have to swing very hard. He is 6'5", 230 pounds. There's no reason for this man to have to swing any extra to be able to generate power, especially in Great American Ballpark. He could be a 5-tool player. He could be, but he's just not right now, and it's sad because he's such a good guy. He's another one of those great guys. You know he's going to amp up the team, and he's going to bust his butt to be good, but he just may not be that guy, Joe. We've talked about this before. We're going to find out if some guys are those guys. I don't know if he's going to be, but he's still one of the only guys who has the potential to be a guy. So I'm hopeful that maybe he took last season and he really took this offseason to heart and worked on it. And even if the spring training numbers aren't there, we're not going to hold him to it because we don't hold everybody to spring training numbers, like you said, right? And if he's doing a bunch of other things well and they feel comfortable putting him out there, that's great. But I'll put him there for my 4 spot for right now. Looking at his Baseball Savant page, it's like, dude, if you just be a little more selective, and if you just put the bat on the ball a little bit more, this dude is a potential star. But he just... last season was so frustrating for me with him, and I know for you too.
Yeah, this is why we get called an unserious franchise. We're going to have this guy on the roster again.
Yeah.
He will be, I think, on the roster opening day, barring another move, which doesn't seem like Outfielder will be part of the pecking order, which sucks, but I would actually love to make this an open competition for the last spot on the roster for the rest of spring training. Like I said, I don't care about spring training for everyone else, but all these guys are not good. Spring training last year, not good. Even Stu Fairchild, I don't think did that well. You can be a specialist and be bat left against left-handed pitching, but they need to show me why they need to be on this team. That includes Will Benson, Stu Fairchild, not hitting well in spring training so far. Cooper Bowman has not been hitting well in spring training so far. There's not many options. I mean, Jacob Hurtubise is playing well. That's cool, but like he batted 185 last year, so that's not happening.
Yeah, no thanks.
It's. I would love for Terry to make this competition based. Have these players feel accountable, because right now it does feel like Will Benson's going to slide into that last spot, and it's just by default. He didn't earn it. It's just, hey, dude, you were starting a lot for us last year, so I would love for Will Benson to figure it out. I think he's a very exciting player when he does it figured out. I'm not sure he's a 5-tool player like you're saying. I think maybe 3 or 4, but he does have the greatest potential out of anyone who is MLB ready at the outfield spot for us right now. I just don't know if you can go a full season of being that bad and turn it around to be a huge asset, even coming off the bench. So, again, would love for them to add another outfielder off the bench, another bat off the bench, because I do think that we are getting to the point where our bench is frail. And I love Santiago Espinal. He doesn't have like a bunch of pop on his bat. He's a guy who hits for contact. Same for Jose Trevino. CES does have pop in his bat, but we don't know what that's going to look like this year with him coming back. So I'd love like a veteran bat with some pop. But right now, the way things are looking is Will Benson, and I don't think Reds fans should be excited about that. But if they do really keep him on the bench and play him limited amounts, unless someone else is struggling, and then put him in and use him situationally, then yeah, he offers value as some pop in his bat. He offers value with his legs too. He can be a pinch runner for you. So a lot of looking at it. I think Stu would be the guy I would want to win the job that we currently have on the roster right now, just to hit lefties and then be another right-handed bat. But I don't know. This is an awful spot to be if you're the Reds, having this last choice to be who's going to be on the roster. Just like you said, it's probably going to be Will Benson.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. I mean I'm looking at Verdugo right now, who I think, if he was willing to come on a cheap 1-year deal similar to Hayes, that would be great. At some point the Reds are going to have to figure out what they're going to do with their outfield, though, Joe. Like, right now, like, future-wise, beyond this year, you really only have TJ Friedl, and that's if he can come back and be the guy that he was. Otherwise, you realistically have nobody. right now. And you're going to have to start moving some of these guys to the outfield to figure it out. And you're going to have to do it sooner than they have been, too. That's been my other problem is like, they should have been giving Steer or whoever they were anticipating being in the outfield a little bit more time earlier on, too. Like, I'm really concerned about that. I don't even like, I know guys, everybody loved Rhys Hines, where he had that 2-week span where he was just unbelievable. But he's not the answer there, right? Like, there's just, they got to go and they got to find somebody. And, if they got to overpay for Luis Roberts and they think he can be healthy, Joe, at this point, I'm almost feeling like they should just go and try to pull that trigger again, to be honest with you. Because at least you'd have a guy who I think you could depend on for the next few years if they could lock him into an extension as well. Or though he just recently signed an extension, if I remember correctly. So maybe I'm wrong on that too. But I'm just trying to think of like forward. Maybe they even can convert, Joe, some of these infielders to outfielders in terms of like trading for other teams' outfielders, like doing some prospect trades, like high level prospect trades for outfielders, right? Like I wouldn't hate that at all. But they're going to have to find somebody at some point, and they can't just do it in the draft because it's just going to take too long. So I do worry about the outfield position overall. Like you said, I think it is criminal that Will Benson is kind of going to get slotted in there. And if I'm being honest with you, Joe, if he makes the roster, I think they might freaking start him over Fraley again. I think they might. I think they might do it, dude. They shouldn't, but they might.
I'm gonna trust Terry, but maybe it's coming from the front office too. I don't know.
Benson's he's a shiny object that could be great, right? They're trying to mold him into that diamond. I just don't know if he's got that there. So we'll see. I don't know. We aren't gonna. I'm gonna try to not dwell on it too much. I hope. I'm hopeful that things will figure themselves out, Joe. We've got time. That's the one thing we do know is we have time. We've got a couple weeks left. If Benson just starts to come on strong here in these last 3 weeks, great. If Fraley starts to really rip it, great. The biggest thing for them is they should wrap Austin Hayes in bubble wrap for the rest of this spring training. You've already seen he can hit. Give him enough at bats to stay warm and get ready for the season, but then otherwise just, work on keeping him healthy. That's it. That's all we need. We'll be fine after that.
Yeah, and you mentioned, like, the draft isn't a spot where we can get some help immediately, but also not with our strategy, because we only take, like, college pitchers, like, that's our thing. But we do a lot of high school hitters. Like, there's plenty of guys in the draft the last several years. Like, again, we're focusing so much on the pitching, which I like in some extent, but, like, Zach Caglianone was in the last draft. He was a pitcher, but also a first baseman, DH. A little bit of outfield in college, I believe, too. He didn't have the greatest season last year after he went from college to the pros, but also coming from the college to the pros. There's guys who are developed hitters in college baseball. College baseball is bigger than ever, and we're taking guys in high school that it's going to take longer to develop, and a lot of times those guys don't work out, too. So I would like to see maybe taking some more MLB-ready prospects in this draft because we do have such a, I'd say, lull at the top of AAA in terms of hitters, and then we saw that last year. So, it's not a very good draft overall this year from all reports, and even college baseball, high school baseball. But if there is a guy, and hopefully, we figure out who we want, but, can we get a guy who might be a 22-year-old college baseball player who we can start in AA and then goes up to AAA next year and maybe does well and then can come up and probably provide some value for us? Can we do something like that to kind of change things in a way to help us for the future? That's something I think if we're not going to go acquire those players via trade or signing free agents, that might have to be the route we go from here on out, which is just we haven't done. Yeah,
something's going to have to change with the outfield. That is for sure. But that is going to do it for us on this one, Joe. I didn't think we'd have much, but I think this outfield is so much of a topic of conversation. We went a little longer than anticipated, but still good. Good conversation. But do you have any wise words for us as we head on out of here?
Not much. Just Pete Rose is getting pardoned by the president, and I don't have too much to add on that, but it looks like he is possibly being considered being taken off the exempt list from Rob Manfred, so could be in the Hall of Fame. We talked about him in our Pete Rose episode, so I won't dive too deep into it, but it is a little bit of Reds news that came out this week.
Yeah, that was a surprise. I didn't know that Pete Rose would be that important for that to be needing to happen. But hey, if it's going to get him in, then I know it's going to make a lot of Reds fans happy. So, we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, get ready for baseball, guys. Reds baseball will be back 3 weeks from Thursday. 3 weeks from Thursday, Joe. Which is pretty crazy to say. I am very much looking forward to it. I know you guys are as well. As a quick reminder, again, please, if you guys have been watching this all the way through, go to our YouTube channel. If you guys are watching on Spotify or Apple Podcast, get involved with the community, right? We love that and would love to hear your guys' thoughts on anything involving the Reds. If you're just a listener, that's great too. We'd love that. But, we love community stuff, Joe. That's a big fun bit of our job. So we do appreciate you guys who are listening right now, and we hope that you guys are excited for Reds baseball season as well. But that'll wrap it up for us on this one. So with that, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.